All right, thank you. Welcome to the Plan and Zone Commission meeting for the city of Bettendorf for March 19th. May I have roll call, please?
Gibson,
Here.
Kepler,
Here.
Ormsby, Satterfield, Scaife,
Here.
Stoltenberg,
Here.
Wendland.
Here.
All right, gonna get approval of the minutes.
Absolutely. Mr. Chairman, I'll move for approval of the minutes of the meeting of February 19th.
Second.
I think I heard a second there online.
You did from Roy?
All right, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. All right, got the approval of the minutes. All right, welcome to the Plan and Zone Commission meeting. We are a seven-member commission appointed by the mayor, confirmed by the city council. The commission is a recommending body only, with the city council making the final decision. Our regular meetings are held here in the city council chambers at 5:30 on the third Wednesday of each month. We review zoning requests, preliminary plats and final plats, site development and landscape plans, and plan unit development plans. For those of you in the audience, if you wish to speak, we'll ask if you could go to the podium and give your name and your address. Thank you. And before we get started, we have a new member today. Guy, would you mind giving us just a real quick hello?
Well, thank you, and I'm looking forward to being a part of this organization and contributing.
Great, thank you. All right, the next item is still on the agenda, election of officers. Looking for,
Are we well attended enough to proceed with the election of officers?
this is just going to keep going on and on if we
I know,
don't.
it
So
could.
I think so.
sounds good to me, so.
Well, I would like to nominate Roy to continue in his excellent leadership for another year.
Okay. Do I hear a second? That's not Roy.
Second.
All right, we got a first and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Nobody's opposed? All right, good. Roy, you got another year of it.
Wow, I better not spend all the money next time, okay? So
All right, good.
looking forward.
And we
It'll
can-
be year 18, I think, so, yeah.
All right, so now we move on to our first item on the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, this is case 25012. It's a replatting of what was Lot B of the fourth edition, Spencer Hollow fourth edition. It's shown here in this green outline. You do have right here Forest Grove Drive, and then you have the connections coming through the various parts of the past editions of Spencer Hollow. Essentially, what you have is the areas that are contingent basically upon the surrounding type of land use. And what we have is pretty much neighborhood light, and that determines that the zoning, as in the past, it would transfer to R1 type zoning. The area here is Spencer Hollow third edition, is how this was all platted originally. And it follows pretty much, and it conforms pretty much to what we had prior in the design. What you see tonight is what you're getting here. There have been some boundary changes within the fifth, third, and fourth editions in this area right here, where there have been some changes transpiring, but the road layout is primarily the same. So we come here to this right here, the amended fourth edition plat. This is the area we're talking about here that is going to be chopped into basically, or subdivided into 22 separate single-family lots, each being required to be 10,000 square feet in size. This is what the final plat will look like, Spencer Hollow 6th edition. You'll have 15-foot wide easements throughout the area to bring in all the utilities that are necessary. And essentially, what we'll have is Outlot A serving for stormwater detention. We don't have any portion of this subdivision within any part of the floodplain at all. What we do have is the means of getting from point A to point B. You'll have streets that'll still be in a 52-foot wide right-of-way. You'll have 4-foot wide sidewalks. And essentially, what you'll also have is a means of getting through Spring Creek Drive down to Forest Grove Drive. That is your main point of connectivity. And that will be able to collect the traffic and direct it back upwardly into this subdivision. You also have, as is shown on the plat, LV Lane, which will become LV Court at some point. This is LV Lane here, Spring Creek Drive, they all connect into LV Court right here. Staff in reviewing this proposal feels that it follows our comprehensive plan and its layout, and we recommend approval. I would ask, are there any questions?
Thank you. I keep wanting to look, there's somebody there. Go ahead.
One question. Is this sixth edition, are the specs consistent with the previous editions?
In terms of, you mean the conditions that were placed upon the other subdivisions, or?
Yes, and dimensions, like you mentioned, a 15-foot
Yeah,
easement.
what you're looking at, and this is the presentation I had intended to place up here to show you. I don't know how the other one was there, but essentially, what we've got is the future land use here, and it does meet the goal number one. We're promoting natural stormwater management and promoting best management practices, and also street connectivity. There's very little in any conditions that have been placed upon this at all.
Yeah, I think, if I could jump in, Mr. Chairman, this is not a conditional rezoning, just to make sure we're not confusing the audience or listeners. Not a conditional rezoning. The standards of the subdivision, really, we're talking about, I think, right away, was 52-foot with 4-foot sidewalks. We have since the subdivision started gone to a wider right-of-way with a wider sidewalk, but for continuity purposes, we will continue in this subdivision as at the older standard. New subdivisions, of course, will have to meet our new standard, which is slightly wider with the 5-foot sidewalks. That's for ADA purposes, but for continuity's sake, this will still be at the 52-foot standard.
Thank you.
Okay. Roy or Lynn, do you have any questions?
Just one for Greg. It's Roy. The detention outlet, is that part, just for clarity, is that part of the previous
Yes, it
addition?
is. Yes.
Okay.
It was intended to service this entire area. So it had already
Yeah.
been designed for this last piece of the Spencer Hollow subdivisions.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone in the audience wish to address us on this? No. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move for approval of case 25-012, the final plat of Spencer Hollow 6th edition, subject to staff recommendations, which I think are for approval.
Okay, great. Do I have a second?
Yep, Roy will second it.
Great. All right, with that, all right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Onward to the next case, Blackbird Heights.
Thank you, Chairman. A little closer. Our next cases, I should say, are going to be presented together. We have case 25-005 replat and case 25-006 replat. This is a final plat for Blackbird Heights Edition and Gipples Second addition. This is located South Forest Grove Drive, north of Blackbird Lane. This was previously, let me try to, we're using a different browser here, but was a previously part of a number of plats. I'll go into more background on that. The applicants are G2 Partners LLC for the Blackbird Heights addition, and Todd Gipple for Gipple's second edition. The request, this is going in order. Blackbird Heights is the first proposal, and the subsequent replat of that edition will occur after Blackbird Heights is recorded, and that will be Gipple's second edition. But the first edition would replat Lot 1 of Highland Ridge third edition. And then that was our addition. If you recall, we replatted a portion of this area to one lot that was undevelopable. That was due to the previous edition. Prior to that, the developer was unable to secure the construction of all of the stormwater and grading. So we allowed him to replat that area as undevelopable, build the road and the remainder of the subdivision, until such time a new plat was submitted with approved calculations for grading, stormwater, et cetera. So we have that with the Blackbird Heights addition. And that's shown here, that's that area just south of Forest Grove Drive. And then Gipple's second edition will subsequently reorganize the applicant's property, which is located just south of this area, and the newly subdivided property. He's reorganizing it to basically expand his developable lot size and then also take ownership of the outlot stormwater area. Future land use and zoning. This area is designated as neighborhood light on our future land use map. The area is all zoned R1, and these are consistent designations for the surrounding neighborhoods and south, east, and west. So the Blackbird Heights edition, this Lot 1, which is the whole area contained in this plat, is shown replatted into 4 developable lots and 1 outlot far to the west. Each lot has direct access onto Blackbird Lane, and no direct access will be allowed to Forest Grove Drive or Cardinal Lane, which is located right here. Highland Ridge second edition, that was the edition prior to the undevelopable lot. That showed 7 lots in the same area. So it was a lot denser, but it also required much more fill to be placed, hence it not happening. And that's due to those high bid costs. Once that is platted, so once that is recorded and platted, the Gipple's second edition proposes taking some of that land, combining it with Gipple's first edition. So you'll have one developable lot here, and then also taking all the stormwater outlot of that edition. So kind of a lot of reorganization, but you'll still have 3 vacant developable single-family lots from the Blackbird Heights edition. You'll have an expanded Gipple's second edition. The applicant, Todd Gipple, proposes to build a detached structure on that area. In its current form, he could not do that with a separate lot. We'd have to have another single-family home there. So this will allow him to do that and also take ownership of that outlot to the west. Staff contends the proposed final plats meet city standards and code requirements, and we recommend approval of both cases. I can take any questions.
All right, anyone have any questions?
I do have a couple of questions, Taylor. Is there activity happening on that property right now?
So we can go back a little bit. There is grading going on. That was part of the original, when this was subdivided into Highland Ridge second edition. That was all of the lots to the east. You can see actually noted on the map. The road is being constructed, I believe, right now. And neither of these plats contain that right-of-way. That right-of-way has been dedicated. This is only contained within the property that is not right-of-way, west of Cardinal and north of Blackbird. And they can still grade on that property, given we can't develop, get a building permit for a new house. That's the
So
stipulations.
when I drive by there, I can't see all these lines.
True.
I see that dirt is moving. There's also some construction going on. There's houses. Now, they may be on a different area.
Yeah, and I believe you're referring to, and it's a little hard to orient yourself from Forest Grove, but there's houses going up, I believe, it's one of these two lots here at the end of Cardinal.
Okay.
Currently the end of Cardinal. Cardinal will continue all the way to Forest Grove Drive. But those are already platted, and those are actually part of Valley Wind's 8th edition. It's a bit confusing with all the different editions here, but those have been platted already. And if there's any dirt moving on the property that we're discussing tonight, that can be related to grading or, storing of dirt, et cetera.
I'm not saying that I drive by there so quickly that I can't really see,
Yeah.
but it's hard to know from the road. You can't really get back in there.
Yeah,
to
and once
know
that road's
what's happening
constructed,
where.
it'll be easier to kind
Right.
of.
Okay, and then I had one other question. So if this is approved, now the Gipple property includes quite a bit of space, and it looks not very developable. What uses could occur on that land that abuts other properties? Anything? It's an outlot.
So this is all R1. Once subdivided, this will be the final version. There has to be some delay before this can be approved at the recorder's office, et cetera, to get deed of the land, et cetera. But this whole area will be, have houses, or one house exists. The applicant, Todd Gipple, proposes to build a detached garage here, and then these are vacant and will be sold for future development. This area here will contain all the stormwater infrastructure, which had to be redesigned because we have a different impervious surface area, et cetera. So different calculations had to be submitted and approved, which was basically the condition of changing this lot from an undevelopable lot into a developable subdivision, and new grading plan, et cetera.
So is that only for, I don't know if it's detention or retention of just these 4 lots, or?
Yep, there's a small, very, very small detention pond right
Okay.
here. And it drains only those 4 lots.
Okay, so,
And then that's the stormwater drainage, which then goes to the farther southwest. And then the city actually owns, I don't think it has a named creek, but it's a drainage to the farther southwest.
so if I own that lot, and now I own the outlot, could I set up a go-kart track on there?
The outlot's undeveloped.
Okay.
That has.
I can't
yeah.
do anything
No, it's
there,
like
other than-
just like our other stormwater, outlot 1A and the plat notes included on the plat. No development shall occur, and there's conditions in that, on that plat.
I could cut down all the trees. Not that I would, I'm just trying to get, from a neighbor standpoint, what does this look like? It's a big piece of land.
Let me help out. I think
Sure.
I know where
Yeah.
you're going, and Taylor knows the project in intimate detail, because if you remember all those rezonings, let's go back to that corner at Devil's Glen Road. When
That's
the Ball
right where
Diamonds
I'm at.
Right, and so I think I know where you're going. And those areas on the corner, we've had some change in ownership, just like we're having here. Those areas on the corner are going to still develop in a way that is consistent with this body and what council approved as far as conditions on those. And I think we have some really cool proposals, if you remember what happened most recently with Mr. Giefman's project there on the corner. Now we're seeing the ownership change for some of that residential piece, this piece in particular, and we're reducing the number of lots. We think that's better. It's more fitting to the neighborhood that's already existing, so kind of more a large single lot subdivision. Mr. Gipple is buying a lot, and he's also taking ownership of the drainage way, of the drainage easement, if you will, and then we'll tie that ownership to him, which I think is great for the city, because we like it when a person owns it as opposed to an HOA.
HOA,
Sorry,
right.
Mr. Gipple, but then if it's not functioning, I can go find him and knock on his door as opposed to some, HOA name that doesn't
Yeah.
exist. And then he's confined by both R1 and the plat notes for that outlot. So the R1 zoning restriction is there, and so are the plat notes that restrict that outlot. He has already talked to the city and showed us plans for a ancillary structure, a garage, which he's totally fine to build, totally allowable as anybody else would be. No other development besides those.
Okay, that's what I needed to know. Thank you.
Guy, did you have a question?
Really just to reinforce what was said earlier about that construction. If I'm correct, the new homes that are going abut an existing road, so therefore they were approved when the earlier additions were approved.
Correct. Those new homes, which I believe Ann was referencing, are located, I think it's on where one of those two dots are. And that's a aerial from last June. So that road is existing. The road is being constructed and will need to be constructed before we get new homes on this proposed plat.
Roy or Lynn, do you have any questions?
Roy does not.
Okay.
No, I'm good.
Would anyone in the audience wish to address us? All right. With that,
Well, we have two cases. So I will move for approval first of case number 25005, the Blackbird Heights edition, subject to staff recommendations.
Roy will second that.
okay. So I have a first and a second for case 25-005. All those in favor?
Aye?
Aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
And then I will move for approval of case 25-006, Gipple second edition, subject to staff recommendations.
I'll second that as well.
All right. All those in favor of this one? Say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? No. Motion carries. Great. Thank you. All right. Now we're on to the next part, ordinance, public hearing part.
Thank you, Chairman. Our next case is an ordinance. This is amending Title 11, Chapter 14 of the Sign Code. This is submitted by the City of Bettendorf. I'll just go through, I'm just going to use the packet materials for this one. This is doing a number of things to our sign code, but in two specific areas. One area relates to the cleanup of language, defining what an official sign is, and provides categories for official signs. This adds different types of signs from construction, safety signs, but also adds a definition for the Bettendorf light pole banner program signs, and I'll go into more of that in a second. It also amends our billboard section. It adds the I-80 urban renewal area as an excluded area for billboards. So it prohibits billboards in that area. Starting with the light pole banners, these banners are something that's been proposed with our economic development team and some of the owners out there by the Betplex area. These banners would have some beautification efforts of Forest Grove Drive and Middle Road, and they would be affixed to a city-owned banner or city-owned light pole. They would be in the right-of-way, so that's owned by the city. We'd use a third party to produce these banners, and then they have a system for allowing those banners to have a small portion of it be sponsored by individuals or entities. And there's a administrative policy that goes through that to administer this sponsorship, and kind of goes into some of those details. But in essence, this allows what we already have. You see these in a lot of other cities already. They're banners affixed to right-of-way poles, and our code currently doesn't really address that at all. So that cleans up language and allows for this proposed program. Right now, it's just being proposed in that area along Forest Grove Drive, but this would allow it in the future to expand if needed. And I can show you an example of what these banners look like. That pole would be the light pole, and this is what they would be. This is what they are looking like. And the community showcases the contractor that we use, or the third party, I should say.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Is that all we will see on those banners, or is that middle space also going to be utilized?
This is where the section is. That is where the sponsor,
Right.
either name or a trademark logo would be.
Okay, but we're
That's
not
it.
going to put anything else on there? Happy 4th of July or
Not at this time.
pickleball championship or whatever's happening
I
out
think
there?
we could for different parts of town. I mean, now this could be used in a park or in a, so you might put, National Parks Day on one or something. I think we have the right to do that, yeah.
Okay.
But I don't know that in particular what's happening, most after this decision is going to have anything besides that. But we could have other city information on them.
Sure.
And Chris can please fill in, but this right now is defining the banner sign as a sign type as an official sign. So these are signs located in the right of way. We don't allow other signs other than your safety signs, construction signs.
What about the signs downtown? How is this different than what we have currently
The
downtown?
banner signs. It's not, we're trying to have the code match what
What we're
what
doing?
happens down here. And then also, but it did come up with these sponsorships to be clear of what's happening in the TBK area. And so I think to Mark's point, where we see Bettendorf up here, that's really the official part of the sign, and that's really the predominant part of the sign. And so if there was some other official message that the city wanted to make with these banners, that's where that would be done.
Okay,
And so we're really just trying to get the code to be consistent with the present reality, and then also to bring in the TBK area and the sponsorship concept.
So that's the one part we're implementing or amending. So that red line ordinance is attached. It's really just one section of under 1114.3. So you have those public safety signs, public notice, legal notice, utilities. We didn't have those before. Go ahead.
I'm going to stop you for a second there. I love the look of the sign and everything. I just have this fear that later, once we're all gone, because I trust all of us, that somebody may look at this as a revenue generator. And before you know it, we have one of those every 10 feet on a pole that was put up there just for that purpose to bring in revenue. Now, I'm exaggerating somewhat, but are we looking at some point on making sure that these only can be put on certain poles in certain places within certain distance of each other, so that we don't end up with what I just said?
Burma shave.
Yeah.
Well, you got it?
And right now, we're proposing, this is the ordinance amendment being proposed. Staff is recommending a policy, administrative policy, correct, Chris?
That's right. I mean, I think your question is a good one. I think there are some practical answers to it, and maybe Taylor or Mark can go more into that in terms of the types of poles that these would be appropriate for, and that would even work on. It's a limited amount and type of pole that this would work. And it's got to be a city-owned pole, number one, not a Mid-American-owned pole. And so that right there, these poles down here, I believe, are city-owned, and the ones in the TBK area are also city-owned. That's what this would be limited to, is city-owned poles, is my understanding. And they're the more decorative type of pole. I think the idea of this is that it is aesthetically pleasing, and it's something that the city wants. And that's where the administrative policy clarifying some of those details would come into play. In terms of the city code, what we're really trying to accomplish is that this is an official sign, that there are only limited types of signs that can go in the right of way, because it's a very small exception to the idea that signs do not go in the right of way. Only official signs of which this is a subset, and only in very limited circumstances would it be even practical or appropriate.
And I'll add, staff did conduct, looked at other city ordinances. This is very common throughout Iowa and the United States, and there's many different ways to implement through a whole ordinance by itself that goes into detail through, some have nothing, but this is a way to identify the program and then have a policy that backs up that program. So when we say the Bettendorf light pole banner program signs, it's indicating, addressing, the policy will back that up. So I think it kind of tightens it up a little bit, not just any sign on a pole, it's a specific
And they're
program.
only city signs.
Yeah.
I mean, these are city-owned, so they would be city-maintained or outsourced to a city-supported and vetted supplier to the city. So, I mean, making sure that the signs or the banners are taken care of and aren't ripped or aren't,
They look nice.
yeah, that they look nice. That's a key component of the program.
That makes me feel a little bit better, and hopefully down the road, there won't be any city officials that decide we need a lot more signs to drive revenue, so therefore we need to put up more poles. But yeah, we can't do everything for what might happen in the future. As long as it's the city poles now that you're limiting it to, it should
Well,
be
and-
fine.
And there are signs, so I guess we're probably not really generating revenue from ourselves, and the sponsorship piece of it is really more just a kind of a cost neutral, cover cost kind of thing. So we're not, taking the highest bidder to put as a revenue generator. We're just trying to be able to have an official sign of the city that creates a sense of place and also allow that sponsorship component.
It's good to hear.
It's an interesting
I hope it
subject.
stays that way, where it's
Yes,
just,
agreed, very much so.
okay.
Are there any more questions on the first part of the ordinance, the banner program?
Go ahead.
No,
All right. I'll move on to since we are amending the sign ordinance again, we just amended this 11.4, certain parts of the whole sign chapter to implement the electronic billboards and capping of billboard signs. After reviewing, and there was some discussion during our strategic goals by council to looking at the I-80 or the Betplex area regarding billboards. One way to do that, the area that we're looking at is the I-80 urban renewal area. And this ordinance amendment would effectively exclude billboards from this area. Right now, we have different zones, buffering, also a number cap for our billboards, but we have also the downtown master plan overlay district as an excluded area. So this would add the I-80 urban renewal area. Further, in the future, we do plan to have we're going to get into a little bit of more planning for the I-80 area with an overlay district or master plan. We just aren't ready. That's on the goals for this year, or later this year. So this just implements one of those top priorities for that overlay would be to have a exclusion of billboards in this area. Any questions?
Taylor, it's Roy. Are there any existing billboards out there that would become non-conforming
There would be.
if we?
Yes, there are. There are some north of Interstate 80 in the ag fields to the north. I do not have that map with me right now, but I do know there are at least one, possibly two.
Couple there.
Yeah,
Over at TBK, there's, near the sports complex, there's one or two.
but I believe those are actually outside this
Are
area
they just
right
outside?
now.
Okay.
Yep, those are on where I can pinpoint there. I believe there's one here.
just outside.
One existed here and was tore down, and I think there's at least one somewhere around here. Yes, these would not require the removal of those right away, that would be legally, they'd be non-conforming. This is trying to orient where we, kind of where council and public thinks where we want billboards and where we don't want billboards. So it's adding to some of the billboard language that we discussed last year, and just kind of adding another area that we want to exclude from future billboards.
As with the new interchange coming and as the TBK Sports Complex becomes the new entry point into Bettendorf, so many years ago, that wasn't really the entry into Bettendorf, it was kind of rural country. But as it becomes the entry into Bettendorf, council and staff have thought a lot about how this area should look and how we want it to look to be your first impression as you come into the city. And that's driving this ordinance change.
Taylor, one question. When we talked about the sign ordinance several months ago, we talked about digital signs and replacing.
Conversion?
So the signs that are existing out there, would they be eligible for one of those conversions?
I believe that included in the ordinance, how it's written right now, that might be a good amendment to make to it. But right now, it's no billboard signs static or no billboard signs digital display. I think that would cover a conversion, but we could clarify that a bit.
Assuming this ordinance is passed, they would be non-conforming and couldn't be changed.
Yeah, I don't think a
Okay.
conversion would be, it'd be converted to digital display, so that's clearly shown as
Not allowed,
correct.
okay. I was happy to see the first new digital billboard is going up in Bettendorf this week. That'll be a good location at Devil's Glen and Middle Road.
And that's accompanied by demolition of a kind of a non-standard billboard on State Street. So we'll, remember, it's a kind of a replace, right? So you go digital, but you take one away somewhere else in the city, and it's a non-standard one as you come in on State Street and you're entering Bettendorf from the west, so Davenport's behind you, you're driving, and it's the first billboard you really see as you get to town. I think it's a gambling casino or something on there right now on the Illinois side.
Good. All right.
Any more questions on that?
Do we have any more questions? No? Did you have any
Nope.
more on this? So we're ready?
Nope, this is, so yeah, staff is recommending approval of both these amendments, but it's just one ordinance to replace those two sections to Title 11, Chapter 14. And this is an ordinance, so, and public hearing.
All right. Lisa, was there proof of publication for case 25-00-ORD?
Yes, there is.
All right. And we'll call the public hearing to order. Any public comment? Don't see anybody out there that could comment. All right, so we'll close the public hearing. Any further discussion? No? All right, then. I need a motion?
I'm happy to give you a motion.
You're the person today, Ann.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move for approval of case 25-004, the amended sections of 1114, the sign ordinance of the city code.
I need a
Second.
All right, got a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Do you want to do a roll call?
You want a roll
Aye.
call vote? Okay, roll call vote.
Gibson,
Yes.
Kapler,
Yes,
Scaife,
Yes.
Stoltenberg,
Yes.
Wendland.
Yes.
All right, with that, I believe that covers everything that's approved. So now we're on to our ordinance discussions.
Thank you, Chairman. We'll try to, again, try to keep this discussion. We can call it a hard stop, maybe 6:30 or ish. This is really the second half of our discussion. We had our last meeting regarding our zoning districts. We summarized that discussion, so I did send to the commissioners our summary notes for the chapter 4, which is our zoning districts and permitted use tables. The summary from that first discussion is on that part 1 sheet. We just kind of summarize our interpretation of the discussion, what commissioners were, some of the ideas we proposed or discussed, and how the feedback we got from those. So please take a look at those and give us any comment. That really just covered our ag districts and our residential districts. We didn't get into any of the commercial districts, so that is what we'll discuss tonight. So out of all of our zoning districts, I think our commercial districts, we have received a lot of comments on specifically our middle intensity or our C2 district as being problematic in a lot of cases, being too wide open. So our number one recommendation is to address that C2 district. There's a couple different ways we could go about this, and we're looking for some input on that. One option could be creating an additional commercial district. Right now, we have our C1, which is our neighborhood light. Our C2 is our medium community district, and then our C3, which is kind of everything's wide open. We have additional commercial districts, but they're more specialized, like our entertainment district and our office research park district. But those C1 through C3 are the most utilized districts, and they have the most presence, as you can see. Go back to our little table here of how many acres we have of these districts. Those are those three districts that we have the most of out of the commercial. C6 is utilized, but we've seen anecdotally has seen that's not utilized. It has higher setbacks, and some of the site development regulations probably need to be addressed, and we can discuss that in the future. And then our C7 really is oriented towards that TBK type of development, or our casino here downtown. So one option could be, some of the problems that I've noted through going through some of the rezonings that have occurred through C2 is there's just too many permitted uses allowed in the C2. And there's not, without a conditional rezoning or a concept plan, there's some hesitancy from commission and council to just approve that district as is. Probably because of the fear of some of those permitted uses, main gas stations, maybe some of the auto-oriented uses. So one possibility to correct that would be kind of creating an additional district, which is really targeted for some of those uses that have those negative externalities from cars. We're talking the car washes, auto shops, the high vehicular traffic that's not parking, just some of those. That's an idea. Or another option would be to just really look at our permitted use table, which lists all of the uses, and then it has the districts in columns, and taking some of those permitted uses away and changing to maybe taking them away altogether, making them not permitted, or making them more special use permits going to the Board of Adjustment. We currently have that for our gas station it's defined as a convenience with unlimited or limited gas. So we have those defined, and those did go through the process when we had a gas station go into a C2. But I feel still there was I'm not sure the intent of the district was being met totally by that's the feedback I was getting from some of our stakeholders and commissioners. Any thoughts?
I guess
If we
maybe
went that route, then it would be a one-step approval process. Board of Adjustment, that's it.
They would permit the use. We would still have a site plan, but really the use would be still permitted at that point.
I might even back up a step more. Do you accept the premise that C2 has been a problem? I mean, we feel yeah. Do you accept the premise that at C2 you've had the gas station issue, a lot of townhomes and multifamily that maybe weren't what we thought would come there, but when developers showed up and they saw C2. So I would ask this commission, do they accept the premise that C2 is problematic? Because if you think it's just fine, we can save a lot of time. We don't have to mess with this. And I mean, that's how I would pose the question.
It might be helpful to have if I can spell Bettendorf.
Trying to think of examples of C2 where. But
Zoning map on the screen.
they're gonna generate things like gas stations, car washes, they're gonna generate the public's interest anyway, regardless of which district you put them in.
Right.
And yeah, we do beat them up a lot more here, which causes probably more work from you behind the scenes. So my question, I guess, would be, they need to be beat up. When do they get beat up? I mean, by that, I mean,
Yeah, at what
when are
point?
they really discussed and made sure that they really make sense for that particular spot, whatever that is? That has to happen sometime. We don't want an automatic zoning that happens to already be there by chance. And they can just walk in and put in a gas station or something.
Yeah, I think the way we wrote it kind of on our cliff notes here is that maybe there's too many uses, so we would maybe take some uses out and propose perhaps an auto-oriented district that where you have parts of town that are high traffic areas along highly traveled roads that you would allow audio-oriented development districts. That could be a new use district. Maybe it's some type of corridor district. And then we could, of the objectionable uses that may still be allowed in the old C2, we could make more of those special uses so they're even harder to achieve.
I think going off of some different geographies in town, there are areas where we have a lot of commercial adjacent to each other, so maybe that use isn't as objectionable. But we can go to, the case was discussed tonight, areas where it's surrounded maybe by residential or future residential. I think there's a lot more concern of the openness of that district. So this will go back to Forest Grove and Devil's Glen. We really had to pin down the uses, took a lot of work, but that's not a true C2. What ends up is a very altered kind of zoning district, and maybe that's what we kind of create by right, and then have a different district, which kind of on different parts of town, maybe, I'm not gonna start drawing on the map yet, but we have areas on Devil's Glen and Middle that are kind of forming more of a wider open commercial area. That's just an idea. Or even, I mean, we don't want to stifle all development as well too. So it's a balance.
So Taylor,
Hey,
you showed us the area just now
Yeah.
out at Devil's Glen and Forest Grove.
Yes.
And yes, we did have a lot of modifications there through the process. Mark, if this new concept that you have in mind had been in place when we started there, would it have helped us in that process?
Yeah, I think it would have. I think it would have taken maybe some of those most worrisome uses off the table, right? So the pattern I've seen with C2 is that we tend to get townhome and because it kind of incentivizes you to build townhomes and multifamily that then take up the whole of the commercial space, and then there's no actual true commercial services there.
Nothing
So then the
left.
people that live in those apartments and townhomes need commercial services, and they have to go search for them somewhere else. And so I think that's one of the problems we've had. Two is auto-oriented uses, in particular gas stations. And that was the big one when we were talking about that corner you just mentioned was the gas station. But they also used that C2 to build in residential. So it was like C2, the way we wrote the code, the existing code, it really made it advantageous for developers to go in and kind of have townhomes and multifamily. It actually fit better there than just like R4. Just the way the setbacks, the way the code was written, it was more advantageous. I think that's a problem that we need to fix. I also feel like that we now are a town that's developing more bigger commercial corridors and bigger and busier roads where we could say, hey, Devil's Glen Road's kind of the corridor of Devil's Glen Road north to south from, say, Middle to Hopewell or something. That's a commercial corridor now. We may have a commercial corridor zoning that makes sense for that. And that is different than commercial up in the new part of town. That's Forest Grove or something, some corner up on Forest Grove. That's the input we're hearing. To answer your question, yes, I think it would have helped us because we could have taken some of those uses off the table. We had to condition it 7 ways from Sunday. And I was just going to try and pull up for my own edification the zoning regulations and just look at all the things that are actually allowed in C2. And I think you would be surprised if there's a piece of ground, sitting out there in the ether zone C2, what all the things you can do on that piece of ground would to me are surprising. Give me a second, I'll find that for you if you want to continue to
But the concept
deliberating.
that you're talking about, Mark, with the plethora of things you can do in a C2, that's something we've tried to help educate the public on when they come in and maybe they want to fight something. We say, well, you're against a particular use, but the reality is there could be a lot worse uses that you could end up with. So you might want to say, hey,
Gives us leverage.
what sitting in front of you is way better than what could be sitting in front of you with a permitted use wide open. So that's one comment. I think it is important. And I don't want to muddy up the waters, but gas station versus fueling facility, and I look at things like up at TBK, there's 6 Tesla chargers or whatever. Is that a fueling station? Where people fuel in the may look different. Or at an apartment building where there's 10 chargers, the guy that has the gas station said, well, you just put a gas station or a fueling station in an apartment complex. How come I can't be there? So I think as we morph into different things in the future, we need to also have a way to accommodate some things that may look or operate differently than they do today.
Yeah, agreed.
That's a really good point. Do we have anything in our code that dictates where those different types of fueling stations can be located?
So under our current code, what the Tesla chargers aren't really, we have a typical gas station is defined as convenience sales with gas. It's actually kind of two things. It's not called a gas station. It's a bit of a foreign term. A charger isn't well defined. That's the reason why we're looking at our code update. I mean, one reason, there's many reasons. I would point out though, some of the things we're looking at when you're looking at a use and whether it has high impacts. You're looking at the impacts on the adjacent properties and traffic, lighting, all those other things. So a gas station has a lot higher traffic. You're talking high turnover rate. Usually the hours of operation are going to be 24 or 18 hours. So those are really the things that pop out from a planning perspective on how it's impacting a neighborhood. I don't think we've seen anything with the charging stations that are really, a very high density charging station where people are turning over. It'd be no different than you charging a car in your front driveway, I guess, too. So that's kind of how I look at it, my personal perspective. And then the other things from auto-oriented uses we were talking about are also some of the other high turnover with car washes. They're constant high turnover. You have the lights on the cars. There's queue lines, noise. So those think about those as your externalities. That's really how you break it down. Sometimes odors, all those things, all those environmental factors that you look at. It's a little different than looking at it from a residential side where you look at density and you're looking at maybe parking or green space as kind of your factors. When you're looking at commercial, it's more about intensity, and that intensity is usually measured in what I just mentioned, those environmental factors. And those are changing. The commercial uses have evolved. When this zoning ordinance was originally written, it had we had big box stores across the land. We had a lot of different uses, and we don't see those. You're not seeing those anymore. You're seeing a lot smaller buildings with mixture of users of varying types, from restaurant to medical, office to, I mean, you see that all the time. So it's definitely more, a little different environment that we're working in.
Taylor, can you go to our code?
Yep.
Do go to 11.4, the permit use table. Remember, we talked about uses a couple weeks or a couple months ago, and identifying uses. As I've said before, zoning is really identifying uses and identifying districts and then matching them. And so we went through our uses and we added some new ones that we didn't have. I would ask you, maybe even at home tonight or when you get time, to look at the C2 column and go down all different use types and see how many things you can do in C2 just by, P means permitted. You don't even have to have a special use. It's just a use by right. It's a permitted use. And it's why I think the concept was trying to build in kind of a mixed use scenario and why they did this originally, the original intent of this. But I think it ballooned so much, and it doesn't sometimes make sense when you compare them to the adjoining C3 or C1 on either side.
And
It's a shorter list, what's not permitted in it.
Yeah, let me just talk about so in C2, you could have auto rental, auto sales, auto service. You could also have townhomes, multifamily, downtown residential, group housing, boarding house, and boarding houses. So just automatically, I think of auto sales lot, auto services, those type of things, maybe not being well adjusted to be next to each other, right? And so I think that's caused us to have some problems at this committee when we've had uses come in and we've tried to figure out how we're, either going to make them get along, maybe make them get along together, or that they just come in and they use all those residential uses. They take up the multifamily and the townhouse and then basically push off that commercial use to somewhere else now because they still need it, right? You built it all out with townhomes and multifamily, but you didn't put any commercial in. And so it didn't really work out as being that multi-use where you got some of each. It seemed to be kind of one or the other. So I think that's really good to work at. So our question again is, we think what we want to do as staff is we want to take some of those out and or make them special use permits. So there's another layer. And we contend that we are a big enough town now with large enough roadways and corridors for development that we could have a corridor zoning district that allows some of those ones that we might be pulling out of here would allow them to go to that area and think about your gas stations and your car sales lots and those type of things.
Can I ask a few
That's
questions or
general.
make
So
a few,
let that percolate.
just for concept wise? I see C2, you've got restaurants, right?
yeah,
We also have C7, which is entertainment. So let's say, just for argument's sake, we say restaurants now belong in entertainment, so we put them over there. But we want to allow a restaurant in a C2. Would that then be a scenario where now you got to get a special use permit, or you have to go? How do we do each one? So, is a restaurant okay in entertainment without changing your zoning,
yeah. So this is how
or
we're,
vice versa?
what we're doing is we're trying to get input on establishing districts. So that's that top row. That top row needs to be established. Once we give a feel, we're going to give you really a draft, or it's going to be a very preliminary draft. And then we'll put in the Ps, the blank spots, the blank meaning not permitted, so you have to rezone it.
Well, then just take this one example. How are you gonna work through that? So you've got, if we say, yeah, C2 is just too big, let's parse some of that stuff out. Well, the first thing I would say is, okay, restaurants goes to entertainment. But you have somebody that has a C2 area, it's already there, and they wanna come and put a restaurant in. I'm not saying solve this problem right now, but if that's the scenario, how are we gonna do it?
And we're rezoning all the time.
Yeah, we don't want to, yeah, we'll get you in a second
We
there,
don't want to
Kevin.
do that.
Another thing, just thought perspective type thing, we talk about these residential items that are in C2. We're all looking at C as commercial as from the business perspective.
Yeah.
If we flip this for just a moment and look at it from the residential perspective. An apartment building is residential. These side-by-side condos are residential. It would be nice if the pure residential stuff would have their own
And
something. I don't
They
know
do
whether it's
have-
an R7 or a C, whatever, but it would be nice if they had their own. And then we obviously have an issue, not an issue, but a situation where maybe you have a two-story building like we were looking at north of 53rd and Devil's Glen at one point in time, where they were gonna have commercial on the first floor and apartments on the second. That would need to be dealt with in some other way. But that's just one more perspective to maybe look at. And from my perspective, it would make life maybe simpler if it's residential, it's residential. You can call it C something, but it's residential. It's not mixed in with all this other stuff.
And I totally agree with that. We do have that zoning district already. And I think Mark alluded to this earlier, it's really just, it's less, there's less obstacles to go through to do this C2. And it's been like that for some time. It was, I think, intended to be a mixed use, allow mixed use, but we really haven't seen it utilized for that purpose. So I think, and really the purpose of having that zoning district be more direct is for the future, buyers or residents or who have you, know that that's not going to be something and then can be something.
Right.
But C2, you just don't know. So oftentimes you get residential in that C2 and we get there's no buffering, there's no, it's all those standards that we have in the zoning ordinance to protect, people's light and all that stuff is gone because it's under a C2 zoning. So maybe if we allow R4 to be next to C2 and then have those heavier uses be in a separate zoning district, they still can be compatible and right next to each other. And those are for the instances when they need to rezone and they don't own the property next door. If you have a larger project, we really are trying to incentivize the master plan, the DCA district. We still have that. So you saw that with the Genesis project. That is what you, as commissioners, like to see because you see the plan in front of you. That is a one zoning motion, ordinance, and then council the same thing. And you can see how it all fits together. It's really hard when you have ownership mixed up, and then you have a C2 that could be residential, it could be a gas station. If we force the residential to be residential, and then maybe, as Mark mentioned, move some of those permitted uses into a different zoning district, maybe it's just putting it in C3. I think it's a little more, it's more compatible in the end.
It makes sense. I think Guy wanted to.
Yeah, Taylor, let's say if the commission agreed that this is a problem worthy of fixing. Has staff come up with a recommendation of what uses they would recommend be moved?
I think Mark touched on those, and really they're auto-oriented, I believe, for the most part.
Yeah.
I agree.
But we don't have that
Gone
list.
down and specifically
Yeah.
called it out yet.
Yep, I haven't gone to that level. Our draft is not that detailed. We would put, your car sales lots, your auto service stations, your gas stations, your future electrical gas stations. Can't forget those. I think we would want to put those into some type, and I'm going to use a term, and you can change it if you want to, commercial corridor zoning, because they tend to be smaller uses. They're not necessarily big commercial uses. They tend to actually be smaller uses that fit on smaller lots and smaller commercial lots. But when they come in with the current mix, where you then now have them, you put a bunch of townhouses up. Those townhouses aren't buffered because they're C2, and now they're next to the car station. That was the big fear. Remember out at the Ball Diamonds, that I'm in C2. I'm going to have a gas station right next to my townhome, and it's going to be loud and noisy and trash and all that stuff. And so, I feel like we can address that if it needs addressed, and I'm up for saying no, it doesn't. Leave C2 wide open. What the market brings, and great. You don't need to plan everything. Okay.
And really, I think if we get enough of feedback, staff would produce a preliminary draft form of some of those uses we'd redo this table with some of those recommended districts, including from our previous meeting's discussion, and would provide that to you, and that would be kind of our next step. And
What is, where the Hope Church is and the Hope, that all went C2, didn't it?
that was all R3.
They got that R3, okay.
Yeah, so our next step is really, would be, once we have a kind of some feelings going forward, to produce this as a draft, this table, and then it might help you. But we want to talk about that C2 district, and I want to touch on just two lighter subject matters with our districts. Our other district that we've kind of identified as, it's not as probably highest priority, but we currently have an I-1 district, which we have 3 industrial districts. Our I-1 district is utilized only in 2 parts of town. We have the Public Works Department, which is an I-1 district, and we also have a part way down by Pleasant Harbor. We have some of that as I-1. So that's the only places in town. We have been receiving a lot of comments from developers and business owners for some property to kind of mix in. It could be indoor storage, or maybe a lighter industrial manufacturing, indoors only type of uses. So we're kind of trying to find a place for that, whether it be like through a special use permit process, or maybe it's its own district that kind of allows, it would probably not be front districts that would be taking up a lot of frontage on collectors and arterials, because we really want to zone those for commercial uses that will utilize that. You don't want storage on your Devil's Glen Road frontage, but you do maybe on the back of the lot where it's not as, doesn't have as high a value to those commercial uses that need the foot traffic, the auto traffic frontage. So that is one item that we kind of discussed. And then we'd keep the other industrial districts. We just don't use, we don't have that. We have an I-2 and an I-3, and they're not heavy industrial, and general industrial aren't. They're old parts of town, and they're just general industrial along State Street. So that's kind of a recommendation of staff that we could.
Good example of a use of that, if you're trying to imagine what that use is, would be Linco in the old Kmart building. Drive by that, we actually got that into I think that's a commercial use right there.
Mm-hmm.
We were able to make that fit under our code, but it's kind of a warehouse. It's kind of a order fulfillment center. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a sorting and assembly center. It's actually clothing is what's actually in the building, I believe. And they supply others all over the country with those products. But it's not an industry. We don't really have a good spot to put them. And you drive by it, it's not a loud smokestack. It's not busy, and it's not noisy. I don't think you probably knew it was there. And it's one of our newer, bigger businesses in town. And that's the type of thing.
Are you asking that we find more locations to move to I-1, or find a way to put those businesses into a C something?
It'd be either an I, or call it, we had a name for it.
Like industrial light?
Yeah,
Sure.
that's fine.
Mark was calling it Light Manufacturing Technology and Commercial Service District, but it's a lot of words.
LIMTC. LIMTC.
I can tell you, when the public sees that there's something I coming right next
That's
to
what-
them,
Yeah.
that's not going to sit well.
We also had that direct comment from a few of our developers, creating some other cities call it employment district, but we're not really, storage isn't necessarily employment. So some type of use that has very limited negative external impacts that you can't tell what's inside the building. Sometimes a servers or a server farm or something would be the same.
I hate to say the word regulated, but something where their permit is pretty tight as to what they can do.
Yeah.
What
We
we see
also-
outside.
And the reason we would zone it really is, from staff's perspective, is we're not utilizing our limited high potential commercial frontage areas along our arterials and maybe some of our collectors. I mean, if you look at Middle Road and I-80, there was a lot of public infrastructure built out there. Mm-hmm. And if we have things such as with, I'll just use the storage or something of that nature, we don't want that to go there. We want services, we want those type of uses. So it's coming from a more of an economic development, but also from a, we want to balance it to make sure it's not too, the externalities are eliminated, so they're allowed. Otherwise, you go too industrial, or it's more service-oriented.
Think about things like Lincoln Electric, Linco, those type of businesses that you drive by that are, quote, industrial businesses. They're a lot different than the, what's the steel plant that had the fire? Sivier, right? And there's more of those than there are Siviers nowadays.
I think
And I
it
think-
makes sense.
Need
You
a
just-
new name,
You
maybe.
need to find the
Yeah,
right
we-
name.
okay.
We need to pick where to
To-
put it.
to your
We need
point,
to
yeah.
have the
Yep.
comprehensive plan changed to show where those can be.
Yep, and that's
And
gonna
then
be
we
part of
can
that.
keep it under control.
Yeah, and I think it'll be more infill areas, areas that aren't already, and we have some newer areas potentially that are kind of like the last lots to sell, because you can't find the right user for it, because that commercial value just isn't high enough. So that's pretty much where we're thinking, that's what we're getting input from developers too on that. Other than, these other items aren't as high priority, but definitely give us your comments on them. There was some talk, we do have a downtown master plan overlay district. Sometimes we don't, there's a thought maybe it'd be easier just to create that as its own, like an own zoning district, so we kind of look at the plan more often than, but maybe not, it works, but we just gotta remember it's that overlay district has its own plan. I think we kind of touched on some of the, if there's any other issues you're noticing, send us some comments on those. Like, I know we have some tweaks we want to make more on like setbacks and some of the site development regulations, which we'll talk about in the future. But as far as actual districts, are they working or not? DCAs, I think we have had a lot of comments on making those be able to utilize at a smaller scale. Right now, it's 20 acres is the minimum size for a project to be a DCA. Maybe we lower that to 10, some number. We haven't, that's the kind of the thought process. We just conducted a DCA, so we're going through that with Genesis, but that's a 50-acre project. That's another recommendation or thought. We still have the Utica Ridge Overlay District, Utica Ridge Road. That's just more of it. Is it still required? It's kind of a two-part. Is it being utilized for is its intent still being utilized? And then I mentioned already the future I-80 Middle Road Overlay District, but that will come with much more to come on that later this year.
Taylor, can you email that grid that you had up earlier to all of us?
Yeah, I can,
That,
so what I'll
yes.
do is, you're talking about the
Yep.
use table?
That
I'll export, this is actually online, so this is how we use it, this is for everyone. But I'll combine these to our current permitted use table, and then I'll provide, given conversation and input from this meeting and our previous meeting, I'll put some of those potential districts that we discussed, combining the R1 and R2, putting that conservation district, kind of put all the districts together, put in like I said, very draft form of the actual permitted uses, so you guys can, put an X on that or put a P there, and that nature, and send that out to you guys so we can continue moving on in our ordinance update.
That would be great.
Can I just make
Go ahead.
2 quick comments? Not to discuss now, but maybe for down the road.
Sure.
You mentioned earlier the idea of having concept plans presented to us when we're looking at C2 properties. Isn't that the context that you mentioned it?
I'll continue.
Well, the whole idea of concept plans has been integrated into our process gradually, and I think it was a big improvement. And so I think the more we can do that and make it an expectation that we see that at the correct phase of the project, I think that's really good it's good for us, and I think it's good for the people who are alarmed at what's going up right next to them to at least have an idea of what it looks like. And the other comment was, we've talked about all these multiple uses. Is there ever any consideration given to a code, a zone that is mixed use? that we just call it that.
But that has.
Because
yeah.
it's not, you know, when I see C, I think commercial. When I see R, I think residential. But we do have mixed-use areas. Why don't we just call them that?
I think that really was when I went back and talked to Bill and I've talked to John Sankson and others, when they wrote this code and the development character areas, first of all, those are supposed to be mixed use. It's putting development together and organizing it by form and function, not just by, you know, R goes over here, commercial goes over here, and the two shall never meet. We haven't really had many of those. We've got two. So absolutely. And I think when they wrote the code, they actually meant for C2 to kind of be that multi-mixed use
Why don't we just call
place.
it that?
But it kind of ends up becoming either or. It either becomes all residential, townhouse, multifamily, and then you got to put that commercial someplace else someday. You've taken that off the board now, and now your commercial is going to go somewhere else, and that was the problem with it. So I think we're very interested in mixed use, but we want it to truly turn into mixed use development, and it wasn't doing that.
We can look at that, though. There are a lot of other cities that do implement a mixed-use kind of zoning hierarchy. It's almost like another classification. So you have your Rs, your Cs, your Is, and then you have a whole mixed-use type of hierarchy. A lot of them are downtown, and that's something kind of why I brought up the downtown master plan overlay district. We have Cs and Rs down there, which really doesn't make sense because it's really about form. You want the buildings to be closer. You want to feel like a downtown. The uses, as long as they have that form, that's okay. So that might be something to look at, but we can do that definitely. Look into that.
Good. With that, I think we should probably call it a day if everybody is agreeable to that.
Wait, Roy's got just a couple thoughts.
Go for it, Roy.
Just give me 2 minutes here. So just a little feedback on what I've been listening to. So I'm a little reluctant to try and head down a path of having a lot of Board of Adjustment special use solutions to problems. I think that creates another whole dimension of challenges. You know, how big is the board that night? What's the composition of the board this year or next year? I think I'd rather see something in the code that's got more continuity than the variability or subjectivity of the Board of Adjustment. Not saying they're not competent, but I just see more opportunity for variability there. If you were to take, let's say, the majority or some number, and if you've had, 50 cases or 30 cases that have been problems, as you guys have identified, they've been issues, and you tried to categorize those or identify the core issue or stumble in each one of those, and then said, if we could take those 30, let's say they are, and have some kind of bar chart and say there's 12 of these and 6 of these and whatever. And if I created a new zone, whether it's a new mixed use zone or something else, would I have solved, I'm making it up, but it's the 80-20 rule, 80% of the issues or the 20% that cause 80% of my problems, have I fixed those with my new solution? That'll give you a little test of, hey, I've got an idea, and if I put the old problems through the new idea, do I still have a problem, or did I fix it? There's a thought process.
It's a good idea, Roy.
Yep, we can definitely, we've definitely looked at our old cases or previous caseload, but we can give you some more, it's a very subjective, what was a problem.
It was a problem for us.
You guys have a good idea.
For us, or a
You
problem
can go
for
back and
others.
talk about a case and say, hey, this was the issue, or here's where we kind of got off track, or where we really stumbled. I'm not talking a full forensic on the old cases, but you guys sitting around in the room could probably identify the vast majority of those, and then test your solution through those old problems and see if it fixes it.
Good idea. All right. Anything else, Roy?
That's all I got.
All right, then. With that, we're adjourned.